Hello guys, welcome to another edition of the Pajabalance Council. Um, so let's get straight into it. This month, in my opinion, the two best factions at high ladder, or rather the two best decks, were Vice and Angulim Nilfgaard Assimilate. Whereas when it comes to the casual level, the strongest decks were Harmony and Fruit Snacker. And I'm trying to address most of these decks. As you can see, Harmony is not addressed here. The main reason for that is because I think only one card deserves a nerf, and that is Chameleon, and it should be nerfed by power in my opinion. But I believe this nerf is gonna go through anyway. Casual players will vote for this card to get nerfed anyway. So I don't think it's necessary for me to put it in my council, however I do obviously support this nerf. And I also obviously support the temple nerf, but for the same reason. I think it's gonna happen anyway. I think the casual players will vote for it anyway. I decided to not include it in my balance council. So let's go through the nerfs first, because these are usually the more controversial changes. Flying Redanian I think is too strong at 4 power right now. Especially in Vice, but it also sees play in a lot of other Syndicate decks. For example, in Tempo Pass Jackpot, where people often Tempo Pass with Madame, pulling out the Redanian, which can be pretty annoying to deal with for casual players. I think this card is too strong. Not only is it very good thinning, but also very, very good carryover, potentially up to 8 points of carryover if you get to use it in all 3 runs. I could maybe think about buffing this card to 8 provisions if it's at 3 power. We will see if it sees any play, but I believe it would still be better at 3 power 8 provisions than 4 power 9 provisions, because it would reduce the amount of carryover that this card brings, and for me that's the main problem with this card, honestly. Not the thinning value, but the carryover value. I think it's just too strong. Slave Driver. Now this one is probably more controversial, because Slave Driver right now is not played in the best Nilfgaard deck, which is Angulim Assimilate, at least in my opinion. So why am I nerfing this card? The main reason is because I expect the Nauzika Sergeant to get buffed to 4 power, as it does every patch. It goes between 4 and 3 power. And I want to make it very clear. I think this card should actually be 4 power. And this card should be 3 power. This is like the most popular combo, right? So if you look at the face value of the cards, this is a 10 for 6 if it's at 4 power, that procs Assimilate. If this card is used to replay a Sergeant, it's also gonna be a 10 for 6 that procs Assimilate twice. It's also a card you can use on other targets than Sergeant, like Magni Division, which is also really broken because it thins your deck and plays for a lot of tempo and also increases your IVO value. I just think this card shouldn't be at 4 power. It's way too good at 4 power. It plays for 11 points plus double Assimilate proc on a Sergeant. It plays for 5 points plus drawing a card on a Magni. I think this is too strong at 4 power. I believe this card should be at 3 power and this card should be at 4 power. And I think that would be honestly a perfect scenario for this card. So I'm really hoping that people will stop yo-yoing this card back and forth, honestly. I think these cards would be perfectly fine at 3 power for Slave Driver and 4 power for the Sergeant, and I can't stress it enough. It would be nice for this yo-yo to stop, so that's kind of what I'm attempting here. I'm trying to convince people that this yo-yo should stop. That these cards will be completely fine if we just keep them at 3 and 4 power respectively. However, I'm also aware that it's very probable that even if the Sergeant gets buffed to 4 power, it's gonna be nerfed to 3 power, and then Slave Driver is gonna get buffed back to 4 power. And that is also better than if we keep the Slave Driver at 4 power, and then if we have both of these cards at 4 power, and then it's somewhat likely both of these cards will be nerfed to 3 power and then get reverted, yada yada. If the yo-yo keeps happening, it's better for the yo-yo to counteract each other. But yeah, this whole interaction is pretty stupid, honestly. Like, I wish this yo-yo wasn't happening at all. Last card is Angulim. I was thinking whether to put Stefan or Angulim here, but I didn't want to double nerf Ivo. Angulim is a nerf to a very specific deck, which is the Angulim Assimilate deck. Angulim doesn't really see play outside of Assimilate. I mean, maybe some people are memeing with it, but this card is extremely strong in Assimilate right now, especially since Rent-free decks are pretty unpopular right now, and people are not really... people are pretty hesitant towards buffing rent-free, so I think that's gonna be the case for quite a long time, that rent-free decks won't be that popular. And there are a lot of artifact decks in the meta. And the main problem I have with this card is that if you have any matchup that has an artifact at all, it doesn't even need to be a strong artifact. This card, even on something like a Vial, plays for 11 that triggers Assimilate, which gives it very high floor in any matchup that plays an artifact. The punish for when you run into a matchup that doesn't have an artifact, I mean, it's big, but I honestly don't think it's big enough considering the ceiling of this card, and the ceiling of this card is insane. I mean, there are a lot of good artifacts in the meta right now. There is the Harmony scenario, there is Novigrad, there is the Necromancer's Tome, there is Temple, there is even Kertrold. There are so many good artifacts in the meta right now, and Angulim not only can replay these artifacts, she's also 3 points on top of playing these artifacts, and also triggers Assimilate. And in Assimilate, it's very easy to get value from basically any artifact you want. I mean, for the scenario, you just need to copy opponents' units to proc it, right? With Informants, or Torres, or Kur, or Todd, etc. When it comes to locations, I mean, same thing. For example, one of the most common matchups when playing this deck is Angulim NG versus Fruit Snacker. All you need to set this card up is 1 Obsidian Mirror, and that's basically it. Like, you just copy 3 bronzes, then you spam Informants in round 3 to copy the bronzes again and pull out the bronzes you got in the graveyard from the Obsidian Mirror round 1, and voila. I think Angulim is a bit too strong right now, and I prefer her to nerfing Stefan because it nerfs the very specific deck, which I got to 2650 MMR it with. There is also one more person that got to 2650 MMR with. In fact, right now Nilfgaard is, I believe, the only faction, as I'm recording this, that has multiple scores above 2650 MMR. So yeah, and it's mostly because of that deck. I believe other councils want to nerf Torres and Stefan anyway, so I don't really want to put these nerfs myself, so I decided to go for Angulim here. Then we have Novigrad. I think this artifact is too strong, it just gives you too much carryover. The coin carryover you get from this card is, well, depends on the round, right? But let's say you're gonna have a 5-card round 3. That's 4 coins of carryover plus the order, which is gonna be around 6 points. Sometimes way more if you get a spender when you need it, or a poison. But let's say it's 6 points. That's already 10 carryover, which is a lot. And honestly, like, the coin carryover is sometimes more than just 1 point per coin, right? Like, you can make usage of these coins by spending for more than 1 point per coin. So I think this card gives you too strong carryover. It's auto-included in a lot of Syndicate decks right now. I think only Crimes don't play it. I think it's too strong. I think it deserves to be nerfed. Lesser Witch is actually not a nerf. This is a 2-step change. I had Tyr in this slot before, but I'm not sure about nerfing Tear. I mean, it's very likely that Warlords will go back to 5 power, 5 provision, sorry, because of the casual reverts. And then Warriors will be strong again, but only really at the casual level. And nerfing Tear would also nerf other decks, the more niche decks, which I am not a fan of. So I decided to use this slot for a buff instead for now. We will see if, how the meta develops. If Tyr needs a nerf, I might advocate for it next patch. Or Vabjorn could also be another nerf to Warriors, but yeah, I decided to go for this card for now. Obviously, we're planning to nerf it first and then buff it to 6 power to give Relics some more options. Also, with the nerf to Mashi Shuffle, I think this combo with the Mashi Shuffle wouldn't be that strong anymore as it would be with Mashi at 10 provisions. So I think it's a cool way to give monsters some more archetypes to play with, as honestly, yeah, right now, I mean, 90% of the time you play against monsters, you play against fruits of Eastgift, which either Necker or mid-range, which is doesn't really make for a very diverse meta, does it? We also have a Riptide nerf. I just believe this card is too strong at 9 provisions. It's auto-include in every monster deck, including Necker. I think a provision nerf is a better approach. I don't think this card should be playable in Necker. I think I think the Necker monster decks should honestly struggle with control because they have a lot of points, like crazy amount of points, and I think there should be a downside to those decks. Riptide is an amazing control tool, but honestly, the control is not my biggest issue with this card. It's the amount of points it plays for. Like, it plays basically for 12 for 9 almost every game. Sometimes you will be forced to play it ranged if opponent blocks it with like a shield or a very tall unit. Most of the time it is a 12 for 9, which is pretty good value, and then it's a very strong control card at the top of that. Like, I just don't think control cards should play for that many points, and the fact that this card was played last patch when it was at 10 provisions in every monster deck other than Necker anyway, kind of proves the point, right? Like, if this card was auto-included 10 provisions, why did we revert it back to 9 provisions? There are other ways to buff monsters, and I also hear one argument a lot that monsters don't have enough control, but in my opinion, people that say that monsters don't have enough control ignore the fact that monsters are a faction that is poised the most to use a lot of the neutral control options. Like, monsters is by far the faction that, for example, makes the best use of Erondite because it has the easiest time of staying ahead on every turn due to the amount of point slam it has. Monsters also have a very easy time putting Eskel in their deck because monsters barely have any humans in their deck. So Eskel is also a natural choice. And sure, you could say, oh, these cards are neutral, not monster. But they fit monsters the best, in my opinion. And I mean, the best proof of that is the fact that probably the most popular control deck on the ladder right now is the Fruits control deck, right? So for me, saying that monsters lack control options is just ignoring a lot of other facts. So yeah, I think Riptide should be nerfed. And I think a provision nerf is better for it because I don't think this card should be playable in Necker. And also it's more likely to stick because people don't like this card not having 10 power because of the Might synergy, even though it doesn't really matter for the Might. I mean, it would only matter if you play this card back row, which doesn't happen most of the time. But yeah. So these are the nerfs. Mostly, yeah, targeting Syndicate and Angulim and G here. As I said, I'm not nerfing Chameleon because I think it's gonna happen anyway, and I don't think Harmony needs any other nerfs than Chameleon. Harmony was fine last month when Chameleon was at 4 power. I've played the deck a lot. It had a lot of weaknesses. It wasn't strong. It wasn't too strong at all. So I think Harmony is perfectly fine with Chameleon at 4 power and it doesn't need any other nerfs. And yeah, when it comes to Fruit Snacker, I mean, I only have a Riptide nerf, mostly because the other Balance Councils already suggested a lot of nerfs for that deck. Like initially, I had the Harpy Egg nerf here, right? But Metallic Danny and Kerpeten and Dauren are already suggesting that nerf, so it's gonna go through. No point in for me to suggest it. There are people that also wanted to nerf Necromancer's Tome and just kill the Necker deck instead. But it doesn't only kill the Fruits Necker deck, it also kills Relic Necker decks, Vampire Necker decks. I don't see a reason to kill these decks, honestly, and I don't think Tome will be playable outside of Necker. Like I've seen arguments that it will be playable because it trades up to a Heatwave, as you can use the order of the card to trigger a Death Wish, but that's just not true. Even if you trade up by 6 points, the rest of your deck is pretty much garbage because you built your whole deck around Tome. So it doesn't matter that your Tome technically traded up on a Heatwave when the rest of your deck is just trash and you're gonna lose the game pretty much every time if you play this card without Necker and your Tome gets Heatwaved. Like, I don't think that's a good way to play this card. I think it should be playable in Necker and it's better to just nerf the Fruits Necker deck directly because for me it's the only deck. It's the only Necker monster deck right now that is a problem. Okay, so that's about the nerfs. I'm not gonna talk much about the buffs because buffs are usually the least controversial part. I want to buff Harpy to counteract the Harpy Egg nerf. Basically, it's only gonna affect Death Wish, and I guess Mushy Truffle decks as well, although after the Mushy Truffle nerf, I think that's completely fine. I don't think that's an issue. Death Wish has been pretty weak recently, and this nerf to Harpy from 5 to 4 power was one of the reasons for it, in my opinion. So after the Egg nerf, I want to buff the Harpy. It's gonna be a pretty decent buff for Death Wish. And even if you get the bonded combo off with the nerfed egg, you still get 1 power in the process because you get 2 points on 2 harpies and you lose 1 point on the egg. While it's a pretty big buff if you don't get the bonded, which I mean is what usually happens, right? Most of the time you won't get the bonded ability off. The Marian Infantry is an attempt to give an R some more variety. I also expect an R to be pretty weak next patch because Temple is gonna get nerfed. It's kind of likely that Marine or Siege Support will also get nerfed. And I think an R could actually struggle. An R already is not that great this patch. Like, I've had decent success with Shup Erland, but that deck is basically gonna get killed after the Temple nerf, as it's very awkward to adjust provisions after the nerf. And Temple Siege is, in my opinion, not a strong deck right now. It's a tier 2 deck at best, in my opinion. Didn't really have any problems beating it with a lot of decks. So yeah, I believe this card could nerf too much. I think at 6 provisions it should be at 3 power. It would maybe give some more variety to the faction. Maybe there would be a reason to play Stockpile, for example, instead of Inspired Zeal. I think it's a cool idea. And then Conqueror, I'm supporting Kempreten and Dauren on this buff. I think Conqueror should be 8 power. I think it's pretty laughable that it doesn't even see play in the only deck it would ever see play, which is Frost. Because right now, if you look at the 4 provision Frost bronzes, most of them are just better than Conqueror. Like, Riders give you good thinning and also a power play with Oberon. Navigator plays for 10 plus points. The Wild Hunt Warrior plays for 7 points in theory, but the potential removal and also spawning Frost synergy with Aristocrats, Foglets, etc. is just way stronger than just blank 7 points. Taskmaster gives you a Purify. The only card that is maybe worse, although I'm not even sure if it's worse, it's the Hound. But honestly, Hound can probably easily get above 7 power in most games, as it's not really an engine you would prioritize removing against Frost. So I think this card deserves to be 8 power. I mean, Marine already plays for 8 points, and Marine is way more useful than the Conqueror because the buff ability you get from Marine is very strong at protecting engines. So I believe this card should be 8 points. Some people were arguing that, oh, we shouldn't buff this card because it plays for 10 points with Oberon and the leader ability, but like these points come from Oberon and the leader ability, not this card. Then, you could also say that the Wild Hand Warrior plays for 9 points right now, while also giving you Frost synergies if you count the leader buff and the Oberon buff, right? So I think it's fine for this card to be at 8 power. I'm not sure why it's so controversial in the community, apparently, but yeah. Oh, there is another thing, I guess. Another argument that is used by people is that this card shouldn't be 8 power because then it's gonna be played with Portal, where I present to you this card. This card already exists and it gets played with Portal, and yeah, I don't know. This card is literally better than this card right now, without any deck building restrictions. So yeah, don't really see the point in that argument either, honestly. I don't think Portal into NL Conquerors is gonna be played. In fact, even if the Fiends get nerfed to 7 power, it's unlikely. Because it's a horrendous brick, right? Like if you draw the Fiend, then it's fine, you can just play it. If you draw this card in a Portal deck, then it's literally 0 points. So I think it would be fine if it replaces Fiends in the Portal decks or like Necker Warriors, because it punishes you more if you brick it. I don't think that's a problem. Alright, let's go to provision buffs now. Olaf, this card is not played right now at all. This is an attempt to buff mostly Self-Wound Necker, which I think is a cool deck. And this card would fit it well. Synergizes with stuff like Note. You could maybe even consider playing Heim with this card, which is a pretty cool combo as well. I think Olaf is a pretty wholesome buff. I like it. Next I have Inspirational Ballad. This is kind of a cheeky buff. This card can potentially be really strong, obviously, but to get value from this card, you need very specific setup that is very hard to achieve. And you need this setup to happen fast, because if you don't get this card, because if you don't play this card early, then I mean your Vitality is not gonna fully proc. It doesn't really see play at 5 provisions, but it's a pretty cool card, and I kind of want to see some people cook with it. So I think it could be a good idea to buff it to 4 provisions, let people play around with this card. I don't think it will be too strong, because yeah, it requires very specific setup that is hard to achieve. And Vitality is also awkward to get value from compared to Boost, right? It requires a lot of turns, it requires very early setup. You could maybe play this card with the Frog Mating Season, but usually the decks that play Frog Mating Season want to go for Devotion, so yeah. And it's also not a nature card, right? So you don't really want to play it in Gift. I think it's a cool buff, personally. It's a card that doesn't see any play at all now. And then the last buff is Cupbearer. Honestly, Cupbearer is the buff I care about the most, and the only reason I have it in the last spot is because it's a pretty popular idea. A lot of people wanted to buff this card, so I think it doesn't need a big push to get buffed. Cupbearer right now is very weak. It doesn't really see any play. It's a good way to buff Aristocrats and, in general, Bold decks, in my opinion. It also gives NG a potential Golden Purify, I mean, it already kind of has it a diviner, so I don't think you will play this card just for the Purify value, you would just play a diviner instead. But yeah, it's a nice flexible card in decks that play poisons, right? And I believe it's overcosted right now. Like a lot of the faction purifies right now are 6 provisions, like Queen of the Night or Gremist or Ida. I believe Cupbearer should join them. Cupbearer is obviously a bit stronger than most of these cards, but he has lower power as well to compensate for that. So I think it's fine if this card is at 6 provisions, and it's gonna be an impactful buff. I believe this card will definitely see play at 6 provisions. So yeah, this is my Balance Council. Let me know whether you agree with my picks or not. Looking forward to discussing in a civilized way in the comments. And yeah, it's gonna be it for this Balance Council this month. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.